Time to cancel the Cabal, with Stephen Roberts. On MSI Radio.
I'm sure, my
Sometimes
friend.
even by people that love me.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, MSI, and welcome, Truth Broadcast Network. I'm Steve Roberts. I have Todd Foster.
How you doing, everybody?
Hello. I also have my guest up here. Let me get everything ready up on the screen here. I'm going to read a little bit. I have Eddie Craig with us. Eddie Craig is of LogosRadioNetwork.com. And Eddie is going to speak on the Tao of Law. The Tao of Law is a Chinese word loosely meaning way or path. Most accurately, Tao is not a name for a thing. Rather, it is underlying nature, natural order, and principles of the universe. Thus, Tao of Law's goal is to teach not only true law, but the underlying and guiding principles of law that the modern court system, judges, police officers, politicians, legislators, and even we the people seem to have long forgotten. So, welcome to the show, Eddie.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yes.
Good to have you, Eddie.
Yes, it is very, very, very good. First, I guess we can get a little bit of a story of your biography, a little bit of your background, if we can, before we get into the heart of your heart of the show.
Okay. I grew up in East Texas, a little town called Nacogdoches, though before I even started school, I'd lived in every state of the Union but Alaska and Hawaii. My dad was a pipeline welder, so we moved an awful lot. And I went to school there, grew up there for the most part as I got older. But as I was growing up, the things that I was being taught and the things that I could actually see being done didn't always seem to match, and I spent a lot of time alone as a kid just learning things for myself. So as I got older, that developed into the things that I took with me into the jobs I had later. I spent 14 years in the United States Air Force before I finally realized that they could do anything to me there they wanted to. The U.S. military, folks, is still the only form of legalized slavery still left on the planet. They can work you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're not supposed to be able to say or do anything about that. When I decided to get out, as close as I was to retirement, I figured that, hey, even if I do retire, I'm going to have to pay them instead of them pay me, so I may as well just get out and find a real job with real money in it. And I got out from there. I became a computer consultant, and I've traveled all over and done that. I'm an ex-deputy sheriff. While I was in the military, several augmentee jobs I've had included assisting military police. I worked part-time overseas, with the police, going downtown and policing the GIs basically that were downtown, drinking and partying and all that. And I saw it more as a way of making sure they got home safe than just rousting them or something like that because they were misbehaving. But for the most part, things I saw as a deputy, things I've seen in life, period, and now the things that I've been studying over the years, including the transportation issues, the due process issues, and things like that. The fact that they can tax our private property, and then if we miss one penny, come in and take the whole thing as if it belonged to them in the first place and we were just paying rent. All those things that I was finding out just didn't gel. So I have devoted myself for the last several years to this full time after having my last run-in with the state comptroller's office here in Texas, where in my computer shop I refused to charge and collect sales taxes. And I did that because I diligently researched the tax statutes, and I found out that the only people that are required to have the certificate and can be liable to collect and pay the tax are corporations. It's not the private mom and pop businesses. Then I researched it some more and found out what the sales tax originally was intended to do, and that solidified it for me. I told them I'm not collecting your taxes anymore because, one, you don't pay me for it, meaning I'm an indentured servant, not going to do it. Two, this property is mine. It's not corporate property. When I buy it, it comes out of my pocket, and I have to wait to recover the costs. This property is private. Even though I'm selling it in my business, it's entirely private. So you don't get to tax it again. And so 5 times they SWAT style raided my computer business and tried to shut it down until finally they took me out and hauled me down to the municipal court on a bogus traffic warrant that did not exist, so that they could seize my business and lock it up and take everything in it, because I refused to collect their sales tax. So now I have made this, I've come to Austin, which is our capital, and I have made it my full-time job to change this at the source of the problem, the people that we put in office.
Well, that's awesome, Eddie. Yeah, I like to see someone taking that kind of action. I mean, what you just described right there is mafioso, making up a false warrant and dragging you down and using an entirely false pretense to attempt to disrupt your way of living and seize your assets.
Well, I agree. I mean, I even went so far before I decided to just fully not collect. I spent 1.5 years writing to the comptroller's office, to the individual 8 field office agents and things like that, asking questions about, show me where this statute makes my business liable for this tax. I mean, it's the same thing with the federal income tax. There's no law that made me liable in the sales tax statute as a private business that's not incorporated for the payment and collection of those taxes. And they refused to answer. And just like with the IRS, you ask that question, instead of getting cooperative answers, you get threats. And that's exactly what happened to me.
Yes.
Right.
It's just like on the in the IRS and the federal tax handbook, it says that federal taxes are strictly voluntarily paid. But if you don't pay them, you get a SWAT team in your backyard at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and the federal government's just one level of the government, though by far the one that believes it can get away with the most. That completely misapplies the law that's put in front of them any way they want to.
Have you have you had any type of standoffs or anything like that as far as your computer business or any other type of dealings? Or
When I told them that I was not going to pay them a penny, but they refused to allow me to back into the business unless I agreed to shut it down. So I packed it up and stored everything, and I immediately came to Austin, and I've been after them ever since.
Very good.
Wow.
Go ahead, Todd.
Oh, that's a heck of a story. Yeah, it's just, I mean, listening to you describe what happened to you, again, it's to me, I just thinking, wow, that's mafia. That's a mafia. I mean, we're dealing with a mafia here.
Oh yeah, they even went so far as to make sure that the last one of the times they took me out of my shop, on they had a newspaper reporter out front to take pictures, and they ran the story that I was wanted for outstanding traffic warrants. That warrant that didn't exist. They had
Wow.
done that in order to try to discredit me to my customers and prevent me from functioning in my business.
Right,
And that to me was going to be the last straw.
right, right. Well, yeah, that's kind of like that's reminiscent of Don Corleone coming into your business and saying, "Hey, listen, if you don't pay me this quote unquote protection fee every month, I'm gonna have your my boys come in and bust you in the kneecaps with a baseball bat, and then if you don't pay after that, we're gonna burn your place down." I mean, it's the same type of activity.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the attitude of the people that do it, it is absolutely inhuman. They have absolutely no desire to understand their job. All they enjoy is the fact that my job authorizes me to use whatever level of force I deem necessary to get what I want. Now,
Right.
if you or I tried that, that would be a crime. I
Exactly.
don't see how tacking the label government on it changes that at all.
Right.
Well,
Absolutely.
well, you're getting into the appeal to authority argument there, Eddie. There,
I've stopped appealing to authority. I kick it in the teeth every chance I get now.
exactly, exactly. You and Todd were speaking while just before we got the stream. You were speaking on driver's licenses and things like that. Would you like to expand on? I wasn't paying much of attention to you two speaking because I was doing other things. But what did you ask him, Todd?
Well, basically, I was just commenting on the fact that I was reviewing his video previous to the show, previous to coming on air. I was reviewing the video that he did on Alex Jones about the driver's licenses and the differences between a quote driver and a traveler, and what defines your vehicle or vehicle usage as making money on the roads, and what is just personal travel, et cetera, et cetera. I did a video on that as well. And so it was really refreshing to see someone else like Eddie, get the information out there. And he was basically saying all the same things that I was, that I had talked about. So it's really nice to see other people getting a grasp of these things and trying to get the word out there. I mean, when I heard him saying things like, people have to understand that, being a driver is different than just being a traveler and traveling from point A to point B for personal reasons, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe you could expand a little bit on your video there, Eddie, because I think you did a really great job.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it took us 4 hours total from the time I got there to get everything set up and ready to go. And then I did the whole thing from beginning to end, no script or anything like that. I just given them the stuff that I was going to show. I've become that familiar and attuned to the project as it is and the information that
Right.
I just went straight from top to bottom with it, presenting everything as it came out in the process. And what it amounts to is every state has either a transportation code or a motor vehicle code, or just a vehicle code in some cases. But when you look at the specific subject matter of what's being governed in these, you'll find out that the state is getting to the point where it's charging, just like for the property you own in land, they're attempting to charge you taxes and fees for the use of what rightfully belongs to you.
Right.
Now, it also bothered me to hear them always claim, well, the state owns the roads. Well, the first thing I want to know is define state to me, because I know of at least 4 definitions for state. So what are we talking about here? And in fact, at the federal level, there's 26 at the federal level, actually, for the term state. But when you get right down to it, the state doesn't own anything. The people own it. The state is just appointed the caretaker of the public property.
Correct.
We pay the state to make sure that our roads stay in good condition. We pay the state to make sure that they're properly marked, lighted, so on and so forth. But the state does not own them when you're talking about the governmental entity rather than the political body.
Right.
They don't own them. We do.
Right.
So for them to tell me that, one, they can charge me a fee to use my car. They can make me do all this with my car, register it, inspect it, and have it insured. They started me asking questions a long time ago because that all goes against everything they're teaching you about the Bill of Rights. For instance, there is no valid contract in law that's compelled. If a contract's not done willingly and knowingly with a meeting of the minds, it's not a contract. It's not an agreement.
Absolutely.
Yet, they try to treat every interaction with them as if you're contracted with them to do it. Everyone always argues that the driver's license is a contract with these guys. Well, it's not. The license itself is a contrived document. There's no way for it to even begin to fulfill the legal requirements of a contract. It's put together out of all these various documents and pieces of paper and other information that you never laid eyes on when you went down and filed the application.
That's right.
Okay, so the license itself is not the contract. What becomes the closest part of the contract is the application you filled out to get the license. But again, when you ask somebody for something, is that really a contract, or is it an agreement, or, you know, and an agreement and a contract in law are virtually synonymous. It's just the terms under which an agreement can be fulfilled versus an actual contract that is the only variation. For instance, there's what they call an adhesion contract. By association, this applies whether you realized it or not. And a lot of that is what they're doing with transportation. They're taking the use of property for a particular purpose, they're licensing it, and they're charging fees for everything involved in it in order to ensure that their job to protect the public safety is complete. Well, that's all well and good, as long as you limit the application of those rules only to those things to which it properly applies. Well, when the state realized, in my opinion now, when the state realized that they could only tax a small portion of the cars that are being used on the road because they're being used as vehicles rather than cars or other forms of private conveyance, and that they were losing out on licensing and the registration fees and the insurance policy kickbacks, which, by the way, every state that has insurance companies within it gets a kickback for every insurance policy issued, and in some cases for every certain dollar amount of the policy. So they use that to make money.
Right.
When they can't force you into those things, you're not paying them and they're not generating revenue off of you. Well, when they found out that less than 10% of the highway usage was by commercial entities at the time, they realized how much money they were missing out on. In Texas, just the citation side of the industry, writing traffic tickets and such, statewide is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. The state literally steals billions of dollars a year from the public, illegally taxing them on the licenses they're not required to have, registration they're not required to have, inspections they're not required to have, and insurance policies they're not required to have, but are forced to have.
Right.
Now, when we look at how that affects the price of things, let's look at the insurance first, for instance. In a free market, insurance would be cheaper if they had to compete for your business. But just like lawyers, they pretty much know that you can't go to court without one. Well, you can't get in a car without one the way the state wants you to believe the statutes are written. So the insurance company is free to ignore the free market and write a price across the board that everybody else is going to automatically agree to, because they know as long as they stay within a few pennies, their profits are much bigger, and people can't say no because they're forced to have the insurance.
That's right.
Now, let's look at who lobbied for mandatory insurance. The insurance PACs at the legislature.
Yes.
Oh, we could save the state billions of dollars a year by making everybody have to have insurance. Oh, well, I fail to see how the state had anything to do with it at all, since it's the company that's carrying the policy and not the state.
Right.
On top of that, when you look at it from that point of view, the state gets a profit off of this. Why wouldn't they want you to do it? So they compelled everybody into the idea of you have to have an insurance policy. And so the insurance company said, great, now we can jack them up twice what we need them to be. And then we can compete in that margin that we've been able to make much larger. And as long as we all agree to stay within a few pennies of the top of that margin there, then our profits get maximized because everybody has to do this.
That's
now,
right.
To me, it seems pretty clear that we have constitutions both at the state and federal level that say the government cannot compel contracts, nor can they interfere with the obligation of them.
Exactly.
And, you know, creation and obligation or fulfillment. That's pretty clear to me. If they can't compel the creation of a contract, then how can they compel me to participate in mandatory anything that requires me to contract?
Right.
Now,
Yeah, would you say it's an accurate statement to say that when you sign the papers, your papers in order to get a driver's license, would you say that it's accurate, that it's an accurate statement that when you put your signature down on there, that you are actually giving up some of your rights in order to have that driver's license?
absolutely not. The courts ruled on that a long time ago. A right cannot be converted into a privilege, nor can it be licensed and taxed as a privilege.
Right.
They can't do it, though they want you to believe they can. So
Right.
these ideas they have in these codes about implied consent, that
Right.
just doesn't fly. I didn't imply consent to anything that violates my right. And you
Exactly.
can't tell me that I have to violate my rights in order to comply with your privilege.
Hey,
Exactly.
None.
hey, Eddie.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Did you know a lot of these things when you were a Texas State Trooper then, or
I
did you
was
learn
not a trooper. Everybody keeps mixing it up. I was a sheriff's deputy.
sheriff's
I
deputy?
worked in
Okay.
the county jail. I worked with the other guys out there in the field and things like that, but I was a sheriff's deputy.
Okay.
Now, yes, I was already studying all this then, and the entire time I was working there, not once did I ever write a traffic ticket.
So it didn't bug you at all. That was going to be my question. I'm of the understanding that it bugs a lot of the police and sheriffs that they have to write tickets and stuff like that.
I don't know how many of them I've ever met. I have a cousin that is a police officer right now, and he is a good guy. He isn't out there to abuse his authority, but he's admitted openly that he does use traffic stops as a pretense to make a stop for things that he suspects are a problem. He's actually arrested a lot of people that have left the scenes of burglaries and things of that by using the traffic stop to pull them over. But despite the few times, it's just like everything else, despite the few times that you were lucky enough to come across something else that was more serious, even he had to admit that the majority of his stops were just for traffic because nothing else came of it. People got ticketed, and he didn't ticket unnecessarily, but at the same time, the potential for abuse exists, and that's exactly what they've done. I mean,
Right.
Why do you think they increase the number of cruisers on the roads on weekends and holidays, beginning of the month and end of the month? Because that's when they've gone into revenue generation mode. We need to get the money we need up front or by the end of the month because we've got such and such coming up and we need funds. Get out there and write some tickets. Doesn't matter whether they have them on quotas or anything else. If you say we need to raise X amount of dollars, Well, then you don't have to tell them how to go do it. They already know how to go do it. You don't need to say each officer has a quota of.
Yep.
You don't even have to say each officer's got to generate X amount of dollars. You can just say, as a whole, we need this much money, get busy. And that's exactly what they do.
Yeah, we've had that happen around here, Eddie, where it's almost like a, like a Hollywood movie where, most of the time you don't really see them around that much. You might pass them on the road every once in a while. But now and again, all of a sudden you'll go out and you'll see them pulling people over everywhere. You'll go down this street and there's somebody being pulled over. You turn left, there's somebody being pulled over. You go down and turn right, there's somebody on that road being pulled over. And they just come out like, little spiders everywhere, just pulling people over left and right. So you can tell when, okay, yeah, they're out revenue generating for something. Because most of the time they're attending to other business. The sheriff's office is delivering, court summons or, handling other business. The police are responding to, potential criminal activity, et cetera, et cetera. But whenever they need revenue, they really come out in force, and they are everywhere. I mean, they canvass the entire town, the entire city, and you just see blue lights everywhere, and they can come up with any excuse to pull you over. You don't even have to be doing anything wrong.
Yeah, and that's true. And they want you to believe that they're out there for the most part for public safety, but they're not. And we know they're not because watch their behavior.
Right.
They're a far bigger danger to the public in their behavior than anybody that they're writing a ticket to or accosting or arresting, short of the guy doing 100 miles an hour down the freeway drunk.
Absolutely.
Short of that one guy, they're inflicting a lot more harm and danger to the public than the people they're messing with.
Yes.
So what? Some guy's walking down the street at 1 o'clock in the morning, singing his lungs out at full volume, but he's not actually hurting anybody. Is it justifiable for 3 cops to jump on him and taser him to shut him up?
Right, exactly. It's ridiculous.
And you think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not.
No, I know you're not.
It happens like here in Austin, for instance, regularly they do stuff like that to people.
Oh, I know you're not exaggerating. I've seen that kind of stuff happen myself. I mean, that's why years ago I started, telling people, hey, listen, this country is turning into Nazi Germany. And for many years, people laughed at me. Said, oh, do you even know what Nazi Germany was about? And et cetera, et cetera. And I said, yeah, I've actually studied the history quite thoroughly. And everything that happened in Germany that led up to Nazi Germany is happening incrementally right now in the United States. I mean, when did it become okay for people that are supposed to be public servants to electrocute someone with no judge, no jury, no due process? I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, how did the officers before these manage to get along without cops ever getting shot unless they tried to interrupt a bank robbery or something?
Exactly.
I mean, nobody was out to abuse the cops because the cops were not abusing anyone else.
Yes.
And now they've turned the streets into a war zone.
Yes.
Hey, Eddie.
Precisely.
I got a question just along that line, that subject you just happened to bring up. Do you think, well, I believe the police all around the country and probably the world for that fact have been more or less militarized in the last 40 plus years. Do you think they've created their own unwinnable paradigm in conditioning people as they train them to be enforcement officers, and that type of unwinnable situation that you're speaking of right there?
Well, I've been saying for a very long time that the police organizations are the standing army we were told never to tolerate. And the more we militarize them, the worse that's going to become.
Yes.
Why does a small town of 500 people need 6 cops?
Right.
Austin's
or more.
Yeah, Austin's got less than 1 million people in it, and it's got almost 1,500 city police. That doesn't include county deputies. That doesn't include state troopers, which are headquartered here.
Right.
Okay. It doesn't include the county constables, which there's at least one to every precinct. But here in Travis County, there's like 10.
Yeah.
Plus the sheriff.
Right.
And
Well,
yet, I don't hear of that many crimes downtown that would require police intervention to justify having that many of them around, if it's not to use brute force when they need it.
Exactly. Yep. That's right.
Well, I think it's just an absolute unwinnable situation when somebody, a man or a young man or young woman joins a police force and they are being fraudulently told that the people are against them, and they've already had it implanted into their brain from day one that the people are against them, so they have to act and react in accordingly different ways of what they would normally if they weren't trained so.
Well, that's true. They do. They are trying to separate them into an us versus them mentality. And that's been going on. If I had to guess, that began in earnest in the mid-'60s.
That's what I'm saying, 40 plus years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
In the mid-'60s is when that came down as the new policy of public interaction. The public doesn't like you. If you're not careful, the public is out to harm you. So you need to make it home at the end of the night. No matter how many of them you have to take out, you protect you. And in fact, their behavior puts them in the situation they get into 90 times out of 100.
Yes, and it doesn't actually help the fact that many inside their own groups and organizations are, possibly doing criminal activities themselves, and they are told to look the other way and hush things up, and that doesn't help the facts.
Well, that is true also. I mean, there are lots of officers that tell you, I don't like this, but honestly, if they don't like it so much, why are they not speaking out? I mean, let's think about that. If you think you're alone in the department, well, you might be justified in thinking, if I say anything, I'll just lose my job. But you socialize with these folks. You can get a feel for who likes it, who doesn't like it, and so on and so forth. You can ask questions, and, yeah, it's going to get you eyeballed in a way, and maybe even watched for the future for a while. But when you understand that what you're doing isn't right, and you have a moral compass that actually works, then you should be diligently looking for the people that would back you up and support you. We have a project that originated here in Austin by Antonio Bueller called Peaceful Streets.
I know
He
Antonio,
started it
yes.
right after he got abused by Austin police for filming their abuse of two women on a DUI stop one night.
Yes.
There was one lady that they had, the person that was behind the wheel, had out giving a field sobriety test to, and the girl that was with her was in the front seat yelling out the window at her not to take the test. Well, the cops came over and yanked this woman through the window of the car, slammed her down on the pavement, on her knees, and then elevated both of her arms almost completely up over her head from behind with her locked down in handcuffs. They were literally trying to injure this woman.
Yeah, they were trying to dislocate her shoulders. And
Antonio, well, they call it pain compliance.
Right.
What they wanted her to do was to just shut up and let them railroad this woman into a confession that they could fabricate through the sobriety test.
Yep.
And folks, I'm going to tell you right now, do not ever agree to a field sobriety test. They are entirely up to the officer's opinion as to whether or not you pass.
Yeah,
He will
right.
accuse you of failing. He doesn't even need to get blood or breath to back it up. He just simply has to make the accusation, and the fight is on. And now you're going to pay money to a lawyer and everything else. But anyway, they're trying to force her into paying compliance. Antonio sees this, and he immediately starts to film it and yelling out for them to stop trying to injure this woman. One of the cops leaves the woman and immediately comes over, jumps on Antonio, and wrestles him to the ground. And somebody across the street managed to start videoing that interaction as it occurred before the officer actually touched him. And you can see Antonio there with his arms out. He's not touching the cop. When the cop knew he couldn't make the accusation of assault that way, then he made the accusation that Antonio had spit on him while he was talking to him. But the video proved all of that fabrication by the officer was a complete and total lie. And now Peaceful Streets was born out of that. But they are now the terroristic force on the street. They're not to serve and protect.
That's
okay?
right.
Okay?
That's
they
right.
are not to serve and protect. They're there to collect the check. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment about that earlier, Eddie, when you were talking about the police and stuff. Is, I laugh to myself now when I'm driving around and I see one of them and it says on the side of their vehicle to protect and serve. I'm like, yeah, right. You're supposed to be a public servant and you now behave as public masters. And this whole pain compliance thing, that's for slaves.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure we outlawed that.
Yep, exactly.
They're rapidly trying to bring it back.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, Todd, you just did one thing right there that on my show I would have gotten all over somebody for. You referred to your actions while you were out as when I'm driving. Just FYI, folks.
When I'm traveling.
That's one of the list of things that I have that's called the deadly sins. And right now we have a list of 8 of them in what I teach in my class. The 8 deadly sins all relate to, and it was the 7 deadly sins, but I sat down and analyzed some of the other stuff that they're actually doing in the courts, and I added an 8th.
You need to have another one, right?
Yeah, well, what they've done is they've taken the terminology that sounds readily familiar to everyone, and then they've used that within their statutes because everyone recognizes it in its common usage. But one of the things that I teach when it comes to statute is that if they define a term in a statute, then it's a 100% guarantee that they're using that term in a way other than is the common usage. If they weren't, they wouldn't have to define it. You could just go to the dictionary and get it. But instead, they define it within the statute. That means it's got a specialized, specific meaning to that statute, or the code that it's in, or whatever, depending upon whatever scope it says the definition has. This chapter, this section, this subtitle, whatever. But in any case, those terms are used to describe the activity related to that code. And here in Texas, they're only allowed to have any statutory enactment address one subject. It used to be object. Then they fought to have our Constitution amended because object was too limiting. When it was limited to one object, they had to pick one thing, like a ball bearing, and then they had to write the statutes around a ball bearing.
Right.
Instead, when they changed it to subject, they can just say, okay, the subject is banking. And now they're justified in creating any kind of statute they want in any volume and quantity they want in one shot and enacting that and say, okay, there's our subject. Well, in 1995, that's what they did with our transportation code. They recodified it all at once from what was at the time several hundred pages into a code that is almost 4,000 pages. How do we go from several hundred to 4,000 in a rewrite?
Yep.
That seems, just how did we understand it before when it was so much simpler? How do you expect us to understand it now that it's, 10 times in size?
Yep. And that's a result of letting part of that, part of the reason for that is that's a result of allowing corporations to take over our society, amongst many other things.
That's one part of it. Here in Texas, they have what they call the statutory revision process. And they've created, back in 1963, the Texas legislature created a committee, and they called it the Texas Legislative Council. Anything enacted by the legislature is not put up for public consumption right away. It goes from the legislature to this entity called the Texas Legislative Council, whose job is to then create statutes from that enacted bill. But not only are they doing that enacted bill, they're taking the old Vernon's annotated civil statutes and they're recodifying them into Texas statutes. So they're basically taking the old statutes and rewriting them and renumbering them and reorganizing them into these new codes. Now, if they were doing that on a verbatim basis, that may not be such a big deal, but they're not. They are wholesale rewriting the language of those statutes of old into the codes of today. And they expect us to believe that they're doing it properly and without expanding the nature of the statute and the enactment and so on and so forth. I can prove in all kinds of statutes where they have put in things that are nowhere to be found in the original enactment at all. Plus, there's a part of our Constitution here, and every state constitution should deal with this in some way. And if you want to fight this, then I suggest you learn your state constitution backwards and forwards, especially when it comes to the individual departments of your government, to find out what their powers to do things really are. And then look at what they're actually doing, because they will not be the same. But I've gone through and I went and looked at what they did in these enactments. The rewrite of the code in 1995 does not comply with the Texas Constitution. It says right there that the legislature is forbidden to change the subject matter of a bill by amending it. They must repeal the original act, rewrite what they're going to rewrite, and reenact it in its entirety. They cannot piecemeal it when they're going to change anything dealing with the subject. Yet that's exactly what they did. For instance, in the original statutes, we have 3 specifically identified forms of a license. We have operators, commercial operators, and chauffeurs. Those are the 3 kinds of licenses that the actual law recognizes. The recodification of the Transportation Code in 1995, those licenses are nowhere to be found. Instead, they've created a blanket term called driver's license. Then they defined it in that new rewrite in a way that doesn't include these 3 original terms and subjects. Now they charge you on all complaints with not having a valid driver's license, but without telling you what kind of license that's actually inferring. Because these terms are the only 3 allowed by law, and they're not included in the definition of a driver's license. And when you look it up, a driver's license means only 3 different things now in Texas law, and they never charge you with those. They're an operator's license, or I'm sorry, not an operator's. They're a temporary license and a learner's permit, and what they call an occupational license. Those are the 3 licenses that are now listed in the statute rewrite of 1995. Well, when you look all of them up, it's very clear that they don't apply to you and me. Okay, an out-of-state license, a temporary driver's license, is one that's issued to someone out of state that hasn't moved here yet, but is planning on it. It's issued without a picture. Does that describe the one that you have in your pocket? No. A learner's permit, that's the little paper one you get, okay, when you first go to get certified that you can drive. Well, If a temporary license only applies to someone from out of state, and a learner's permit only applies to someone that's under a certain age, that is just learning this and this and this, then what kind of license does that permit become when you turn it in for the plastic one? It can't be the out-of-state license. So if it's not a learner's permit anymore and it's not an out-of-state license, maybe it's an occupational. Then you look and find out that an occupational is not handed out by the Department of Public Safety. It's handed out by court order from a judge. The Department of Public Safety has to actually issue it, but they can only issue it if a judge issues a court order saying that this person has been relieved of their regular license. Well, again, what was their regular license before you relieved them of it and gave them the occupational? It wasn't an out-of-state. It wasn't a learner's permit. So what kind of license is it? When you start hitting them with that kind of logic, you should see their heads start to spin. It's a scene out of The Exorcist.
Right.
But they still won't answer the question.
No, they can't. Do you have a license now, Eddie?
No, I have not. The last license I had was actually issued in Kansas, which I got right after I moved there. I was still serving in the military at the time. And so the military insisted you have it because you're military 24 hours a day according to them.
Right.
Thus you're always on government business, thus you must have a license. Even in your private car you had to have a license.
Right.
So that expired in 2004 and I haven't had one since.
Okay.
I still have my cars. I've got two, in fact, and I still travel around in them, but they don't have the state issued anything on them.
Okay. I've actually heard you say on the Alex Jones show that on the off occasion that you do get pulled over, there are some things that you ask the police officer, and I thought maybe you might go into them. And I think I have also heard, I'm not sure if it was you, but it may have been somebody else, that when you do get pulled over, the police officer has actually broken 6 federal laws. Do you know if that's true?
No, what I say is that in every single traffic stop, there is a minimum of 5 due process violations. A minimum of 5. Okay? Those being that 1, the officer is attempting to unlawfully apply commercial law to a private entity, the transportation code. So he's already made the false presumption that you're engaged in an activity that grants him the authority to stop you. Okay? When in fact he attempts in no way whatsoever to determine the validity of that presumption. He just assumes it and goes from there. Okay? The second one is the false imprisonment that occurs from the stop itself. You're being held against your will without authority. You are compelled to produce information that the officer can use against you in a court of law. That can also be used to incriminate you. Okay? So right there, the 2 points of due process where you can't be compelled to provide information or testimony against yourself, and you cannot be compelled to provide evidence or information that can be used to incriminate you. Those are both violated. Then they insist that all your rights have been waived by the mere fact that you possess that license, and you must waive all of your rights to surrender this stuff without a warrant, without your consent, even though they can use it against you. Okay? So in all of that, those will happen in every single stop. Let's not even get to the point of the illegal search and seizure of that information. Okay? It'll just keep building upon that every single time. So there's always a minimum of 5 due process violations in a traffic stop for a non-commercial entity by an officer. Now, the other thing you're asking about is what I've written up as the transportation script. And what that is it's a series of questions and responses for you to use whenever you're interacting with a public servant. Doesn't necessarily have to be in your car. It can be anywhere. You cannot consider any public servant your friend. I don't care if they actually are.
Right.
When they're wearing that uniform, they are not acting in the capacity of your friend. They are acting in the capacity of an agent for some entity, whether it be
right. Agent for the corporation,
county, or entity.
Agent for the corporation.
Well,
right.
yes, in some forms. The sheriff, for instance, is not an agency of the corporation per se, because here in Texas, the sheriff is a constitutional officer. He's acting on behalf of the state, and in that particular instance, the state should be defined as the people, because we are the state in a collective sense. Okay?
That's right.
In a political sense, we're the state. In a corporate sense, there's an entity that may be called the state of Texas, but the sheriff doesn't work for that, or at least he's not supposed to. He's supposed to be working for the political body, the people, making himself being a constitutional officer. He is supposed to make himself the enforcer of that law first and foremost. And in our Constitution, the way it's written, I can't find any authority for a sheriff or a constable to enforce any law other than the Constitution itself. I can't find any authority for that whatsoever. The fact that they've been commandeered to enforce statutes, now we're getting into being agents of the state. So it really depends what they're doing in that moment as to which one they're actually representing and whether or not they're doing it in a lawful manner. But what most people misunderstand about this, and this is the way I've heard it expressed and I've adopted, is the term patronate. Okay? There's an awful lot of things going on in the patriot community that they want to believe are magic bullets to the problems that we have. They're magic silver bullets that'll kill the werewolf dead. Okay? Folks, they do not exist. They do not exist. Okay? We have as a collective society and political body only one magic bullet. That was our Constitution. The one that gave us the specific authority to disband or get rid of our government in any manner we deem necessary when it no longer served the will of the people. And I got to tell you, that's been going on for a very long time. The silver bullet is us together. There is no other.
That's right.
And until we realize that and act accordingly, nothing changes. So the purpose of this script was to try to reestablish knowledge that has been trained out of you in your schools, in your interactions with authority, with your entire upbringing as a child. You've been taught that authority is always right and always knows better. That's not true. Sometimes it is, but it's never always true. Especially when they're telling you that you waived your rights when you took that license. No, you didn't. In order for me to have knowingly, willingly, and intentionally waived any of those rights, you would have told me at the time of application that that was one of the requirements. You didn't. There was no meeting of the minds for implied consent to take my blood, to take my breath, to compel me to produce information you can charge me criminally with or use against me in any way you wish. There was no meeting of the minds on that. It was never even a factor of the discussion when I was filling out the application. And I certainly didn't see it in all the paperwork. So where do you get the idea that I consented to give you implied anything?
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
So people do that because they no longer know and understand what their rights are. Your rights, people, are limitless.
Yes, they
as far as how many and of what type. The only limit you have on them is how you can use them to affect the rights and property of someone else. If our rights are equal, then whenever they meet, this is how it stops. You can't come into my area. I can't go into your area. This is it.
Right.
Now, if I consent to let you pass that, that's up to me. But until my consent is received, knowingly and willingly, you can't go beyond this point, and I can't go beyond it either. They've forgotten that. They figure that authority, when it demands something, must be obeyed. Even if it's harmful to you to obey it, you have to do it.
That's right.
That's not true, folks. It's absolutely not true.
Well, Eddie, we're actually on the first hour here now. I'd like to take about a 6-minute break and run a couple of little things. And if you'd like to go get you something to drink or go to the bathroom, we can come right back at the beginning, at the top of the hour.
Okay. However you want to do it, that's fine with me.
All right. I need a break, and I'm going to run a little thing for somebody on MSI, and we'll be right back in a couple minutes here, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Welcome back, everybody. I'm still waiting on Todd to get back from his break, so we'll go ahead and let Eddie get into the script he was referring to. I believe you were about to preface it, or maybe you had prefaced this script?
Yeah, this script is meant to help you to relearn what to say and do when you're having an encounter with a public servant. And you can actually go download this script off of our logosradionetwork.com website. Just go to logosradionetwork.com/T as in Tango, A-O, Alpha Omega, Tango Alpha Omega. And what that page has on it is a description of the website that we're working on and getting ready to launch, what we intend to do and how and when we intend to do it. And there are links there for the various scripts that I've been working on to try to help people out in particular situations. This one by far being one of the most important. Now, you'll notice that there are several things in here that would seem counterintuitive to good sense when it comes to dealing with these cops. Some of which is, don't ever give the cop what he wants. Okay, you would have to understand the commercial nature and the way the system works in court much better for me to be able to explain that in an hour as to why that's necessary. But the fact is, even though they keep telling you that you're required to produce it if any officer demands it, if that is true and they can use that information against you, then the first question you need to be thinking to yourself is, how is this not a violation of my 4th and 5th Amendment rights? Okay? If they can use this to incriminate me, or they can force me to let them take it without a warrant, then it's both a seizure and it's making me testify against myself in violation of my right to remain silent. And the courts have ruled that the right to remain silent doesn't just apply to being verbal. It applies to the production of any information of any kind that can be used against you in a court of law or can be used to incriminate you. So the purpose of this script is to make a record, because all of these encounters are recorded. And if you're smart, one of my first rules is you never go out into the public anymore without a recording device. Just do not do it.
Right.
It's just not safe for you. It's not safe for your children. This needs to be a habit you develop as much as breathing. Don't leave home without a recording device, ever. I carry several. So that way there's always a record of what was actually said and done and the circumstances surrounding it. In fact, I just assisted a girl with her court case where the sheriff's deputy that wrote her the ticket got on the stand and lied. I mean, blatantly lied about what was said at this encounter. But before he got to the stand, during jury voir dire, the prosecutor tried to cover for this guy, knowing he was going to lie on the stand, by telling the jury that, well, we don't actually have the video. Well, we have the video, but it had audio problems. So we have a video, but there's no actual audio on it. So we're just not going to use the video in this case. We're just going to go with the officer's testimony. And we're going to use that, testimony to do our case. Well, let me explain to you why the video magically disappeared, or the audio magically disappeared off this video. The officer got on the stand and testified that he had no reason to believe that this young lady was in any way impaired to be behind the wheel of the car. He didn't believe she was under the influence of anything. He testified to that within a few minutes of even getting on the stand. Yet, I have the audio recording because when she got pulled over, she immediately called me, and my phone records all incoming and outgoing conversations automatically. So I actually have the audio of about an hour into the stop, the officer attempting to fabricate probable cause to search her car and arrest her by telling her that he smells alcohol. And it's a blatant lie. She was actually on her way home from the gym. This young lady has a very rigorous routine of going to the gym 4 nights a week and everything. She doesn't have time to drink. She only has wine at home and every now and then when she goes out with friends, but she's never behind the wheel when she does this. She was not drinking this night, but the officer attempted to fabricate that fact to give himself reason to get her out of the car. She didn't fall for it because I was on the phone with her. And the instant this came out of his mouth, I said, respond immediately, say this. Officer, are you attempting to fabricate probable cause at this time by making false statements into the record and false allegations against me? There was this huge 5 or 6 second pause.
Silence, yes.
And then you can hear the officer, ma'am, I'll be right back. Had I not been on the phone and she had not known what to say, he would have gotten what he needed to make the case for the reason he physically assaulted her by getting her out of that car. But the moment she was able to respond to him so quickly and so clearly, he no longer had a case for alcohol or DUI or impairment of any kind. He was hosed and he knew it. That, gentlemen, is why there's no audio on this video, because this guy got on the stand and perjured himself, saying he didn't have any reason to suspect her of this, and yet on the side of the road lying to her face to fabricate a reason to conduct an illegal search and seizure. That's what his audio would have proved in open court, and I would have made sure of it. So we're in the process right now of doing a public information request for the 4 other cop cars that were on scene at the same time that will all have their audio and video. And so when we get one of those that proves this officer did this, he's in a world of hurt.
Right.
But this script is meant to get you thinking along those lines. She used this, what she had been learning in my class in this script, not to give them the information. She never gave them a license or proof of insurance. Never. And all they wound up doing was writing the ticket and letting her go. And there is always the potential the cop is going to react badly, and that's true even if the situation is good. Okay? You're not doing, the whole purpose of this script is to prevent you from saying and doing something that can look bad for you later. This script is designed to give you a set thing that does nothing but establish the fact that you are attempting to protect your rights. You're not arguing with the cop. You're not screaming and cursing and calling them names. You're not the one that's becoming unruly here. You speak slowly, you speak clearly, you identify what your rights are, and all you're doing is invoking them and not waiving them. That's all this script tells you to do. The cop is going to be the one that the record proves lost his temper, lost control of himself, and committed crimes by his reactions of trying to damage your car, by trying to assault you, by terroristically threatening you with bodily injury or false imprisonment at his hand if he hauls you to jail for not complying with his demands. That's what this script is intended to do. And all the people that have written back to me or called me or whatever to let me know that they've used this script, so far only one of them has told me that he wound up getting arrested. The reason he got arrested, he got out of his car. If he had stayed in his car, that probably would not have happened. But
Yeah,
the
I like
moment
to.
you get where they can reach you and grab you, they will do whatever they want. And then what they're going to attempt to do to cover their illegal assault on you, and you'll see it no matter how easily you're complying, the officer, the moment he touches you, will start to say these words: stop resisting.
Resisting, yep.
He does that to cover up the fact that he is going to inflict injury on you,
Yep.
and this is meant to cover his behind for assault. He is trying to fabricate a case against you of resisting arrest, or if you're pulling away or in anything trying to avoid him, assaulting an officer, which are felonies. He is attempting to escalate this situation in his favor by making that statement. Okay? Don't let him get away with it. You stay in the car, that can't happen. Now, if you're on a motorcycle, it's a lot harder. But that's when it's even more important that you ensure you stay right in front of that police cruiser where that camera is located. You make very sure that you have an audio recorder on you at a minimum that can capture the audio of the exchange between you in case his video develops audio problems.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Somehow they always seem to malfunction, don't they?
Exactly, especially if there's something incriminating against them in it.
Yes.
That's when, oh, well, my video wasn't working that day. Oh, I'm sorry, we only got the video and not the audio.
Not the audio, right. Is there more to this script? I thought I've heard you say that you ask the police officer 3 questions.
Well, there's actually, everything you do in this is a question. You never give an answer. You either are asking a question or you're making a statement, but you're never answering a question.
Okay.
And there's actually not, there is 3 that are the bare minimum, but this script is meant to build as complete a record of everything as possible. The more thorough your record is, the easier it will be to prove your case that everything the officer did was illegal. Especially when he loses control and breaks a window or damages your car, sprays you, tases you, anything that may happen, and yet, as of yet, none of that has happened to anybody that's used my script. And the only guy, like I said, that got actually arrested, that was only because he got out of his car. Now, another guy called me and he said, I have never been stopped and not been arrested, except for the one time I followed your script. Then I went home. The information in this is meant to protect you, not get you in trouble, to protect you. No judge in his right mind can say that you were disobeying a lawful order when all you did was invoke a right to remain silent or a right not to produce something that they could potentially use against you. Your defense is always very easy. I'm not a lawyer. I have no clue what you guys can use against me at any point and what you can't. That's not up to me to determine right now. I'm simply going to protect myself. Then I'll let a lawyer advise me as to whether or not that could have hurt me. They want you to think they can use that against you, when in fact they cannot. So yes, this script has lots of questions. You're basically countering their questions with questions of your own. And the questions are geared at gathering information that you can use, or it's set to making a statement about your rights and their invocation, their demand, or their protection. There are 3 things that everything you say or do should do. That is, invoke a right, demand a right, and protect your rights. If anything that comes out of your mouth or any action you perform isn't doing those 3 things, or one of them, it is the wrong thing to be saying or doing. And that's what this script is meant to teach you, what is and what isn't within that category.
Right, okay. Todd, are you still there? I've lost your video.
Yeah, I'm here, Steve.
Okay, I've lost your video for some reason, but
Yeah,
that's
I'll
all
have
right.
it back up in a second.
Okay, that's fine. Specifically, I have heard you say on the Alex Jones show that there was 3 questions that you asked the officer. Is the first one I believe was, "Am I under arrest?"
Well, the first one is, what is the emergency? And
What
how
is the
can-
emergency? Right.
Then you want to know, am I under arrest? And then after that, am I free to go? You cannot get the same response to the last 2
Last
questions.
2 questions, right.
There's something wrong. If he tells you no, you're, when you say, am I under arrest? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, no, you're in a lawful detention. Well, Texas law, when it comes to a traffic stop, doesn't recognize lawful detention.
There is no lawful
Recognizes-
detention.
I'm sorry?
There is no lawful detention, is there?
Well, there is. They can stop you for the purpose of asking you questions and investigating into a crime. They may be asking you questions as a witness, for instance.
Okay.
And if you're a material witness, they need testimony from you. That can't hurt you unless, of course, you were also the perpetrator. But at that point, they need the information you have under the presumption it can't be used against you, that they can detain you to try to get that information because they're investigating an actual crime. When they tell you that you're in an investigative or lawful detention, Texas law does not recognize that in relation to a traffic stop. Texas law says very clearly that in 543.001 of the Texas Transportation Code, it says that any peace officer may arrest without warrant any person found committing a violation of this subtitle, meaning subtitle C of the Transportation Code, which is chapters 541 through 600 of that code. That found committing is in direct line with the language of both our constitutional interpretation of the courts and chapter 14 of our Code of Criminal Procedure, which says that an officer can arrest without warrant only if an offense is committed in their presence or view. An individual can only facilitate a citizen's arrest if a felony or a breach of the peace is committed in their presence or view. Same thing applies to a peace officer. His power to arrest is no greater than ours. He can only arrest if that offense is committed in his presence or view. And the statute on the activity he's regulating specifically says that that stop is an arrest. It is not a detention. So when he pulls you over with the specific intent of investigating a transportation issue, that's an arrest. It's not an investigation. It's an investigation subsequent to an arrest. Hence, that alone is a due process violation because, as of yet, he has not shown what constitutes his probable cause for even conducting the investigation, much less facilitating the arrest. So they try to get you to help them in that regard. That's the reason, the first thing they usually ask you when they walk up to your car, do you know why I stopped you? Okay,
Yep.
Or do you know that right back here you did such and such? They're trying to get you to confess so that they can move forward. That's another reason why you don't answer their questions, no matter how innocent they may appear.
Right.
It is none of the cops' business where you're coming from. It's none of the cops' business where you're going. It's none of the cops' business whether you've had 2 drinks today or what those drinks actually were. I mean, Me, I'm a natural smart mouth. I can't help it. When people will say something stupid to me, I react accordingly. When a cop walks up to me and says, "You got any drugs or alcohol?" Why? You throwing a party? Or something like, "No, thanks. I'm good.
I'm good, yeah.
I'm the same
stopped. No
way.
problem."
You
I'm the
been
same
drinking?
way, Eddie.
No, thanks. I already had some already.
Right.
It's just one of those things where by answering what appears to be an innocent question and not knowing what your rights are, that is a very dangerous combination when it comes to dealing with a law enforcement individual. Okay? Ignorance of your rights is the most fatal thing going on in America right now.
That's right.
They would have never gotten to this point if people had challenged them at every turn for those violations as they came.
That's right.
Okay? But we haven't. It's been indoctrinated out of us starting very early on in the schools.
Conditioned, yep.
Yes.
I mean, you're taught this is the way it is. You're not taught to question. You're not taught to think for yourself. You're not taught to rationalize. And you're most certainly not taught to analyze and critically think.
That's right.
So,
Well,
most
it got.
people let it fall by the wayside.
Well, you know, I mean, God forbid, Eddie, they have people thinking for themselves. I mean, you can't have that in a slave camp now.
Well, granted, fortunately, I don't see the bars nor recognize their existence. So I'm one of at least a handful that refuse to be that slave.
Right.
And that's exactly why we make such good targets.
Right. Absolutely.
Hey, Eddie, I've got
Yes.
something here for you. I'm not totally positive what it is. I think it's a question from one of the chat rooms. It's about a recodification. Can it take place due to a rebellion, as in the American Articles of Confederation, secession, revolution, and
Well-
externally exposed Reconstruction, as in?
Recodification is something used in relation to statute, not something like the Articles of Confederation or something like that. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Lysander Spooner, but Spooner wrote a book called No Treason. And in that, he goes over all the reasons why the federal constitution and the federal form of government can't actually exist. First and foremost, the people themselves never created it. And the people that did had no direct authorization by the people themselves to do it. They did it based solely upon the determination of their particular state government outside of any vote by the people to allow this to happen, to create a whole new constitutional form of government. When they originally met in that convention, it was to figure out how to fix the shortcomings in the Articles of Confederation. It was not to replace them. And the authority to do that never really happened. They just did it. Then they passed it to a vote by the state legislatures, not the people of the state themselves, but the state legislatures, as to whether or not to allow this to occur, and then to actually adopt it. The people never voted on it. The people never even knew it was happening until after the fact, when they had decided this is the Constitution we're going to redo. And he's very thorough in that. And he gets you asking a lot of questions most people never think to ask. But recodification, that's not a term I would even begin to associate with what happened regarding the Articles of Confederation and everything that was in existence and we considered the law of the land at that time. I just wouldn't associate that, because that's a legal term. That's not a common law term. And
Right.
everything that we're talking about in that area, that's all common law based. That's all
Right.
common law agreement. The recodification's got nothing to do with that.
I've got another question that just arose out of there too, out of a key word you just happened to mention, and that was convention. We just had a week or so ago, and we've had him on twice now, a man from Sacramento, California. He and a group of other people are trying to set up a constitutional convention, and they want to get their hands on the Article 5 of the Constitution. And I haven't been all that great of I haven't been all that gracious of a host when I've had him on twice, because I have my doubts about anyone getting their hands on the Article 5 on the Constitution at all. I thought maybe I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
I think that is the most dangerous idea anyone has to date.
That's why I haven't been all that gracious of a host to
A
him.
constitutional convention is wiping the slate clean,
Right,
and starting from scratch as to what constitutes a constitution.
right.
And guess who's going to claim to be the only people with authority to do that rewrite? The very people
Delegates.
we have now.
Yeah.
No, what
No.
delegates? They're going to say that we've already got our delegates in Washington.
Okay.
Our representatives are already there.
Right.
The same ones that have sold us out a constitutional convention now allows to rewrite all the rules of the game that binds them.
That's what I'm thinking too, Eddie.
No, thank you.
That's what I'm thinking too, Eddie. And
Not even.
Right.
You're going to put the atom bomb in the palms of a group of rabid baboons
right.
with
Yeah.
a 3-foot switch that all they have to do is touch it to make it go off. No,
Right.
thank you.
Right.
I'll pass.
The first
Stop
thing-
the planet. Let me off now.
Right. The first thing to go is going to be the Second Amendment. Guaranteed.
Oh, every amendment. There won't be any amendments. Government is God. End of Constitution.
Right. That's when Obama steps out in front of the cameras with the Constitution and a little lighter, and then lights it up, and
It don't even have to be Obama. It can be any puppet, any
Yeah.
way they want to appoint them. They can say, "Oh, it'll be that guy." You will have no say in it.
right.
They will. It will be entirely up to them what happens anywhere at any time. There will be no more states.
Yep.
It will all be the federal nation.
Yep.
That's all it will be.
Run by the UN.
Well, isn't it already?
Well, basically, but they will just come out and
But at least if we maintain the sovereign states, we can keep it separate and apart from us by force if we need to. But when even our local legislators are selling out to these guys, you can't trust anyone up the chain with a constitutional convention. You just can't, because they control what everybody down here at the bottom considers the wealth, the money, the power.
Yep.
They all want a hand in it from down here. So they're going to sell us out to get it. It's just like what Obama promised to get his voters. I'll give you this, this, and this. Just vote for me and you can have it.
Yep.
And now look what it's got us.
They're worse off now than what they ever was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, folks, if you're listening and you have one, that Obama sticker on your car might as well say, "I'm stupid." Okay? There's just no two ways about it.
Well, come on, Eddie. There's
no way a sane person would put this idiot up there to do this twice.
well, come on, Eddie. They're waiting for their Obama phone, man.
Well,
And the one woman is
who
probably
they're going to be talking to when they're all living on the street. "Hey, man, I'm homeless today. Where you at?"
I'm in the
Homeless
street
on
too.
the other street corner.
I'm in the street too, yeah. But I got my Obama phone though.
That's right. Hey, Eddie, what do you think about the mentality that, some people say, well, hey, when I was born or whatnot, I didn't agree. I never agreed to all these laws and statutes and whatnot, and I didn't sign anything agreeing to these things. And what do you think about that type of mentality and how far that can actually go?
Well, I do believe that in order to live together, we have to be willing to accept that there are boundaries on how we can interact with each other. Now, when it comes to all these rules and regulations, I didn't agree to them either. And for those that serve no purpose to protect the rights of an individual, I could care less about.
Right.
I understand one thing about my government, and that was the reason it was created in the first place. Whether they care to understand it or not, I do. The sole purpose of government was to have the ability to exert the collective force of the people in order to protect the individual rights and property of those same people. It was to give us the power to resist that we could not exercise alone. That's it. The only laws and rules we allowed our government to create relating to us is one that facilitates that protection. If it does anything else, it doesn't apply to me. That's it.
Right.
Now, I have my own code of behavior, my own set of morals. Mine are biblically based. I don't know where everybody else wants to claim theirs is from, but I try to treat people the same way I want to be treated in return, the golden rule, so to speak. Okay?
Right. Right.
Most people nowadays, though, they don't live like that with anyone, and I find that kind of strange. But when they're saying, I didn't agree to this, when do you know a 3-minute-old to agree to anything? He doesn't agree to get slapped on the butt when he's born. He didn't agree to come out, but here you are. It's the nature of existence. Okay?
Right.
So certain things are going to happen whether you agree to it or not.
Right.
You don't agree to have parents, but you do. You don't agree, especially in your teenage years, that they can tell you what to do, but they're responsible for you, and they can. The problem is government has adopted that parental role mentality, and we've allowed it. They believe they can bind us to this like our parents because they see themselves as responsible for us instead of it being the other way around, us being responsible for what they do.
Yes, yes.
We've acquiesced our authority to them.
Yes,
and that should have never happened.
Well, and that's part of the problem, because that's a big part of the problem, because so many people, it really concerns me, to be honest, because I see so many Americans that act like children. They've lost the ability to think for themselves. They've lost the ability to
do for
take
themselves.
To take it right. They've lost the ability to do for themselves, to take accountability and responsibility for their actions, their words, their lives in general. And the majority have this mentality of, hey, you know what, mommy and daddy government, or Uncle Obama, or Uncle Sam, or whomever is going to take care of me, so I just do what they tell me. I mean, I've seen interviews where people, I saw an interview where Leanne McAdoo from InfoWars, she was out on the street interviewing people, and she's asking them questions like, well, what do you think about being spied on through your TV, your phone, your email, your laptop camera, et
Well,
cetera,
I'm not
et cetera.
doing anything wrong, so it's okay.
Right. One of the common responses, well, I have nothing to hide.
I got nothing to hide. Yeah.
Another common response is, well, I want to be safe. I want to live in a safe country. I mean, these people literally do not think for themselves anymore, and they depend on the Nazi fascist propaganda to tell them what to think, and that is so extremely dangerous. And that is why Thomas Jefferson said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, those that give up liberty for security deserve neither.
That was Franklin, actually.
Yeah, that was Ben
Or
Franklin.
Franklin, I'm sorry, Franklin. Yeah, Franklin.
Yeah,
and it's true.
Because what they fail to realize is what they're accepting by doing that is prison.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Because safety is an illusion.
That's right.
Just like control. It's an illusion.
Sure it is.
Okay? Most of the time when you wind up unsafe, it's not because of a situation someone else created. It's because of one you created. You put yourself in a place where you're doing something that isn't safe. You choose to go out in your car traveling around in a heavy downpour, for instance. You deem that I need groceries or to have gas for work in the morning more important than the safety of staying at home. You took a risk. Well, life is full of risks, folks. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and total safety. Don't see that in there anywhere.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
Eddie, Todd, I can recall just a year and a half back in one of my college courses. It was actually a history course, a history class, and it it clearly read in one of the actual chapters that there was a time back in America's past, and I'm sure all over the world, that if somebody would have been doing some of the things that our politicians are doing right now, there would have been people that would have marched to their offices in their own particular districts and their states and drug them out and nearly beat them to their death's end. I'm sure that there are thousands and thousands of people that would like to do that today, but
Right.
this is not quite as prevalent, and not the. I guess my point is, the American public have been conditioned to just believe and follow with unabashed passion, if you will. Anything that
Right.
a politician does is going to be absolute godlike.
Right. Yeah, there was a day when they would tar and feather people for doing the things that they do today. I mean, and the biggest problems that have happened to the American people, and well, frankly, to people everywhere, you've got a mentality of just complete acquiescence, living in cultivated ignorance, and they have been just taught to buy into everything, not to think for themselves, and all of this can be rolled into domestication. I mean, domestication is the kind of the umbrella factor here. I mean, everyone has been so domesticated in the aspect of not being self-sufficient and independent and being dependent on the system, not only for resources such as food and water, but dependent on them to handle all their business and make all the laws and do everything else, and oh, take care of me while I just sit back and go to work every day and come home and eat dinner and go to bed and do it all over again, and they don't pay attention to what's going on. I mean, we've got domestication to the nth degree here that has caused all of the acquiescence, the cultivated ignorance, and the inability to, I mean, just total cognitive dissonance.
Well, I agree. I found an interesting video the other day, and it's up on YouTube. And when you do a search for this, it'll be the third video down. It's called the Ash Experiment, ASCH. This was an experiment conducted in the 50s, and they filmed it. And it's meant to be, kind of funny, but at the same time, it's a very telling social experiment on conformity
Is that the one where the
and
doctor?
individuality. I'm sorry?
Is that the one where the doctor had somebody pressing buttons and it was like an electrocuting somebody off in the next room or something like that?
No, this one is actually very simple. What they did was they put a group of people that knew what was going on into an elevator with one person that didn't.
Okay.
And the group would come in and they would all stand facing the same direction, the rear of the elevator or the side. And then the one person that didn't know what was going on, the objective was to see how they would respond to what the people around them are doing. And in every single case, though one person would do it slower than the other, they would all conform to what the other individuals did. If
Sure.
they turned to face one way, this person would either eventually get there or immediately do the exact same thing.
Sure.
And I mean, it's mind-boggling, and you will see that the one person in this video that instantaneously responded to what the grown-ups around them were doing, this was a teenager. He had already been so indoctrinated to the adult authority mechanism that even with the elevator door standing wide open,
Right.
these people would turn and face the side. And even though he was standing there looking at the door, he would turn and face right with them. And they'd
Right.
turn back to the back and he'd go right with them. I mean, just instantly. And that's why they wanted control of the schools. That's why there became a Department of Education at the federal level. to control the schools and get this concept ingrained as early as possible.
That's right. Yep. That's why they start getting a hold of our kids in preschool and pre-K and kindergarten.
Exactly. And that's why they fear homeschooling so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they are attacking homeschoolers left and right. Because these kids are getting not only better grades, they're learning how to think for themselves.
People growing their own food, yeah.
Yeah, they're not stuck in the program.
Yep.
Right. Oh, they don't want the chattel thinking for themselves. I mean, that is very dangerous.
Oh yeah, I agree. It is. But
I think well, I got a few seconds here. I would like to say that Mike Pachesney is coming up in about 16 minutes on his show. Anybody would like to stay on the network and check him out, go ahead and do that. So we'll be wrapping up in about 15 minutes here. Have we actually gotten into the presentation that you had planned on doing tonight, Eddie, or have we gone off on a different rabbit chase?
Well, I mean, to me, it's just information. It doesn't matter to me what it is as long as it's truthful and it's something people need to know. Now, if we were going to sit here and talk about Miley Cyrus twerking on the EMA, sorry, guys, I don't have time for that kind of discussion. But, it doesn't matter to me I don't really try to present material. I try to present ideas and concepts. I try to teach people to think because they've stopped doing it.
Yes,
and if you're going to be honest with yourself, you have to admit, I don't understand because I've never thought about it.
Right.
Sure.
I've never considered why I would need to think about it.
You know, Eddie, there's a really good reason why somebody, I think it must have been an elitist maybe, many years ago said that you shouldn't really talk about politics and religion all in the same room because people begin to fight. And that is their absolute best weapon, is people fighting against each other and not coming together and talking about how we're being screwed so badly.
I would be willing to bet large sums of money that God was just as much a subject in that original Constitutional Convention as the subject matter itself.
Sure.
So I understand the concept, and you're right, especially when you have a room full of Christian conservatives and a room full of atheist liberals. Yeah, you talk politics and religion, you are going to have a fight.
Right.
But if it's a room full of Christian conservatives and liberals, or not liberals, but libertarians, then the odds of there being a fight greatly diminish. It's when you look at the completely polarized nature of the spectrum of ideas that you see the conflict. Well, I think the government should be in charge of everything. Well, I don't. I can think for myself. Well, but don't you think that 10 heads are better than one?
But you're
Not
a
if
racist.
they're your heads.
You're a racist.
Why would I care about 10 heads all up the same butt rather than one that's out and thinking clearly?
Right.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it reminds me of that scene of Mel Gibson in The Patriot. Why should I change one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe you could, Eddie, maybe you could speak to what we discussed off air the other day when we spoke with you about, I think this is a very important issue that we were discussing as far as sovereignty and how there's quote sovereigns out there that think that they're sovereign as an individual as opposed to being sovereign as a collective. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. What you have to understand is what a sovereign actually is. A sovereign has always been defined as the one that has the power to make and bind others to his law. Okay? Folks, there ain't but one sovereign, and none of us are it. None of us, if we're going to claim to be free men, then we have to first realize that's what we are, is men. We're not God. We are not sovereign. Second, if we are free, then no man has the authority to create law and bind us to it without our consent. A sovereign does not need your consent. God does not need your consent for the law of gravity to be in effect. Okay? He doesn't need your consent for the law of physics and motion and light to be in effect. His law is binding, like it or not. We don't have that power, not rightfully, not in any way, shape, or form. So to run around calling yourself a sovereign citizen gives the system the ability to point at you and call you ignorant and deluded, because you're assuming a power you can't possibly possess. The only thing that man can consider sovereign in and of itself that we have is our collective state. When we band together to exert that collective force as a people, then that power is sovereign, because with that collective force, it can be used to create law and bind others to it. The question is it a supreme sovereignty even then? Obviously not. If it were, there would only be one nation, because their sovereignty would be the only sovereignty in existence. There wouldn't be Russian sovereignty and American sovereignty. There would be UN sovereignty, or whatever they wanted to call it, because one sovereignty would have conquered the other and thus bound them to that law. So even in that sense, it's not absolute. We are not sovereigns. We are individuals. We are the supreme authority over our choices, because that's what free will was all about, the ability to choose and to act accordingly. It's also the ability to be responsible for the consequences of that choice. Now, if my God is willing to give me freedom of choice and free will to exercise it, I certainly don't see my public servant having the authority to take that away. That's a ludicrous presumption on their part.
Right.
I am bound only by the principles of I am not to inflict harm on another or their property unjustifiably. And when I say unjustifiably, I simply mean in defense of my person and property, or that of another that is incapable of defending themselves. That's it. That's the only time I'm justifiable in exerting force against another, period. If we all lived that way, we wouldn't be having these wars and rumors of wars that the book of Revelations talks about so readily as to where we're headed.
Right.
So,
yeah, so we've got all these TV programs, mainstream media, on the TV, the radio, even the mainstream on the internet, and they're all talking about Miley Cyrus. Meanwhile, we've got aircraft carriers steaming off over towards Syria, and they're not talking about that. They're more concerned about
and they're not talking about how they're saying Russia is opposed, but what they're not saying is how badly Russia is opposed. Right. Russia has now shipped anti-ship missiles, their best, from Russia over to Syria to defend against the cruisers we're sending.
Yep. And now there's been a unconfirmed report that there's been a tactical nuclear missile been shipped towards I believe it's South Carolina right now. I think the port outside South Carolina. So who knows whether that's going to be shipped on out that way there or pretty soon or not.
Well,
yeah, there was South Carolina, and there was some stealth bombers that had been what they call quasi mothballed. They were also brought out, and that's all being kept hush hush.
Yeah, if they actually attempt to follow through with that, then welcome to Armageddon. We're there.
Right.
Exactly.
Because there's no way any of the countries that are not with us, that are going to act in defense of Syria, like Russia, are going to just turn weapons like that over to them. They're going to man them personally. They're going to stay in control of them. Yeah. But there will be Russian personnel in the country. China
has already pledged to back Syria and Iran
Yep.
and Russia
Yeah,
as
and,
well.
and that's what I'm saying. Anyone that does that, they're going to have personnel there. If we launch a strike that harms them, that's it. It's over. It's
Right.
no longer a match waiting to be stricken. It's a match that's been stuck to the dynamite fuse.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly Steve. Steve took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was just going to say. I mean, we have a seriously volatile situation here because if we go into, Syria is a proxy for a war with Russia, when in actuality, unbeknownst to the majority or to the public, mainstream public, this is intended as this is a hot war with Russia, and what will happen is all these countries will get involved, and next thing you know, we're going to have World War III. Russia and China are going to back Syria. I mean, I know China has also said before that if the United States does anything to Iran, because of the fact that China has significant business interaction with Iran, that if we do anything to Iran, that China is going to back Iran. So this is an extremely volatile situation.
Yeah, we're
it's
in.
Also intended. It's also
Sure it
intended
is.
to be right where it's headed.
Yep.
Yes.
Folks, there's one last thing you got to understand. People do not start wars. Governments do.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
And
Absolutely.
when we abdicate our responsibility to control the people that power that government, we're the ones ultimately responsible for what's about to happen.
Yes.
This was ours to prevent. By
Yes.
any means necessary, this was our responsibility to prevent.
Right.
If we let this go through by sitting there and watching Monday Night Football rather than getting involved and making a change where it needs to be done, even if that means having to take up arms to stop it, you're going to have to live with that.
Sure.
That's right.
Sure.
You can't stay
that's-
detached from this forever. It's going to come
That's right.
home eventually.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said, when I mentioned the 30,000 deaths of children in Iraq, and I post about it all the time, and I tell people, look, this is when we allow these kind of things to be brought down upon others, upon the heads of others, we are ultimately allowing it to be brought down upon our heads, and we've got to start standing up, taking responsibility, and acting like adults instead of acquiescent children.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yes.
what Ron Paul has tried to point out on the foreign policy for so long. They don't come here and commit terroristic acts against us because they don't like our freedoms.
Right.
They do it because we're over there killing their families.
Right.
Exactly.
We're
Right.
stealing their resources.
Right.
Exactly.
And then we're telling the world that we're justified in doing it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
They.
it's ridiculous. And the American people just sit here and go, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
that.
Well, it's as you said, and as I've said too, it's been our fault all along for the last, well over 100 years. It's been
Oh, yeah.
it's been our fault. Silence to them is consent. Silence is consent in a court of law, and silence in their mind, us not speaking out, is consent.
That's right. Well, what strikes me the hardest, Steve, is when I see these videos and these pictures plastered all over the internet of these poor children, these innocent children that are laying there dead. It strikes me so hard that I want people to think about and realize, if that was your child, how would you feel? What would you be doing? You wouldn't be sitting around remaining silent, and you wouldn't be justifying it.
Sure. That's why they have the. That's why back in the middle of the 17th century, George Herman Hegel, I think his name is, created the Hegelian dialect, which is problem reaction solution. They create
Yes.
the problem, we have a reaction to it, and they come along with the solution.
That's right.
They've been funding Al Qaeda and other rebel forces for well over a year now, and they've been trying to blame.
Let's fight them in Afghanistan, but let's fund them in
Let's
Syria.
fund them in Syria. Exactly.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, would you like to take about a minute or two, Eddie, and go ahead and plug the sites in and plug maybe what you've got coming up, or?
Sure. If any of the people listening are in Austin, I teach a informal law class on Sundays down at Brave New Books from 2 to 5 p.m. The website that you can find me on at the moment is ruleoflawradio.com and logosradionetwork.com. And here within the next few weeks or so, we hope to have Tower of Law launched as well. And what that site is supposed to do, if all goes well, is to become the most centralized organization, collaboration, and discussion tool the Patriot community has ever had. It's meant to provide us with all the tools that we need to get organized and to agree on a goal and to put that goal into action. One of the things that I'm having a real problem with is going after the symptoms of the problem rather than going to the source. Instead of chasing down, for instance, the speeding ticket issue and the license issue, we need to be getting rid of the legislators that say that's okay.
Sure.
Right.
You know, and so let's stop going after the symptom of the license and get rid of the source of the problem, the legislator that thinks he has the right to license our rights. You know, we need to focus on that, the source, not everything else. And that's what I'm hoping this website allows us to do and to understand and to make work.
I think one of the most powerful tools that you're going to have on your website there, Eddie, is that tool. I think you referred to it as the Tyranny Watch tool that people can call in.
Yeah, actually, I misspoke. It's Tyranny Alert is what it is.
Tyranny Alert, okay.
Yeah, and it's actually a cell phone app. We're making it for the smartphones. And the purpose of the app, if you ever get stopped or have an encounter with a public servant, you simply activate the app. It immediately starts streaming audio and video to our servers. It will also send out notifications to every member that you've got designated and to all members in your local area, including if your GPS information on your phone is turned on. It will send them your GPS location through Google Maps. They can get directions on how to find you. Basically, it will allow you to call witnesses to this encounter immediately so that you're not standing there alone. Plus, it allows you to make a record of that interaction that they can't steal by seizing your phone.
Right. What's your website again, Eddie?
The website will be Tao of Law, TAOOFLAW.com. It hasn't launched yet, but when it does, we will make it known. It'll be put up on Logos and Rule of Law Radio, up on our Facebook page. You can find me on Facebook, Tao Law, TAO space LAW. You can just go there and send me a friend request. I'll be happy to add you. You can read up on what I'm doing, the status of the website. All of that can be monitored from there. We're using Facebook. We're going to have our own social networking on our site as well, but we're using Facebook right now to publicize our site, to let people know what we're planning on doing, and hopefully get a membership before we need it.
Okay, but your main site now is Logos Radio Network.
Yes, right now it's our radio network website. It's logosradionetwork.com.
Okay.
That's very powerful, Eddie. I think that Tyranny Alert, that's something that I've been hoping that someone would put together. So I think that's going to be extremely powerful in and of itself.
Yeah, I'm hoping it will be the tool that we need it to be to better watch our public servants with. That's what I'm really hoping, and give us the means to hold them accountable.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm actually, after we get through with this interview here, Eddie, I'm going to send you a little message and tell you a couple things. But I would also like to extend another invitation for you to come back sometime here in the near future, and get some updates on what you're doing, and maybe actually get into the meat or the heart of the Tao of Law.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We'd love to have you back.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, I'd like to say a good night to you then, and we'll go ahead and sign off.
All right. Well, good night to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be on your show and to speak with you. And may God bless and watch over us all, because we're about to need it.
Yes, we are.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot for coming on, Eddie.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
It's good talking with you. Take care.
Good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Now, okay, Todd. Let me see if I can get you up on the screen here. Very good show.
Yeah, that was powerful. Steve, for years I've been thinking about, wouldn't it be awesome if somebody could come up with a way that we can monitor what's going on. Like if someone gets pulled over or something happens, that we can, have it monitored, recorded, have other people be able to be witnesses, maybe even come to the scene. And this tyranny alert thing is just exactly what I've been thinking of for years, and I think that is just absolutely phenomenal that he's going to employ or implement something like that, because these are the tools that we need to be able to do exactly what he's talking about and what we've all been talking about for so long, which is to stick together, because if we do not hang together, we will hang separately.
Yep. Absolutely will. Well, I think we'll go ahead and stop this here for the night and sign off. Been a very good show.
Yes.
We don't have anything lined up on Friday yet, so just the two of us, unless something unless something does happen in between now and then.
Right.
So I would like to say for Todd Foster, I'm Steve Roberts, and the show is Cancel the Cabal. We'll see everybody Friday night.
Yes, indeed. Good night, everybody.
Time to cancel the Cabal with Stephen Roberts. On MSI Radio.